In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern, taking a look at warmer temperatures. There will be some intense cold fronts coming through, so think of it like a long-range warm pattern with some cooldowns in between, but those cooldowns will be relatively short-lived. And when we look back at it, the next couple of weeks should be overall warmer. This big intense change in temperatures back and forth will bring about numerous major severe weather events, including one this weekend into the early portion of next week, that we are fairly concerned about for a more major type of event. And there is other storms that look a little bit similar to that, so we will be discussing that. Some snowfall chances for regions in the north that we're going to be talking about as well as out west. So let's just go ahead and dive into things, taking a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here from the National Weather Service. And this one will go from April 2nd to April 6th. And there's a couple of features that are really crucial here. One is what we call a negative PNA. You might have heard me say that a few times. And this is a colder air mass over the western regions of North America. And we can see Alaska here, which is also below normal, telling us that this extends all the way from the United States up through western Canada and into Alaska. This is a relatively intense negative PNA that we expect through this early April timeframe. This is going to encourage warmth throughout a lot of the central states and a lot of the eastern states here for this exact time frame. Now, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at the precipitation during this time frame as well. And as we take a look at it, where are the drier regions? It's really hard to find. It's really just above normal for most of the nation. We do expect some pretty major storms moving in through the west, moving through the plains, and then eventually moving up through kind of like the Great Lakes and up into Canada here. So when there's a ridge, it kind of moves over, and when there's a trough, it kind of moves underneath, which is why we expect that kind of lifting motion as it heads eastward. This is going to bring numerous days of severe weather chances here in the central and eastern states, so keep that in mind. Taking a look at the next time frame, this will be your 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, which will run from April 4th to April 10th. What we see is, again, below normal temperatures for western North America here, and this is going to continue to encourage warmth in the central and eastern states. Now, we'll take a look at what March has brought so far, and really a good final look at March, and it looks very similar to what we're seeing for April. So I think we could just glide into April and see an overall warmer month in the eastern half of the nation, colder in the west overall, similarly to March. And then, by the time we're in May, even if it's below normal, it's still like 70s, upper 60s for most folks. So the warm weather is likely for the most part here to stay for most areas, which is pretty exciting. We had a very cold winter and fairly snowy depending on where you're at. So it is nice to get this warm air going. I'm certainly excited for it. So let's look at the precipitation during this time frame as well. And as we take a look at it, there is a couple of areas that are near normal, but that's the driest we're going to get here, such as California, Nevada, and a little bit of Oregon, and then the southern half of Florida near normal precipitation. But really, we're looking at 90% of the nation in above average precipitation. So continued activity, and we see some of the severe weather hotspots in this, which is definitely indicative of some pretty brutal severe weather being possible. Looking back at the past 30 days, which will be the final 3 days of February and then all of March so far, we've seen near normal conditions near the west. This has been warmer and colder at times, and that's kind of brought it to near normal. We have had that negative PNA at times, so again, colder conditions, and that's likely when most of the warmth was happening in the central and eastern states. We have had colder times in the east as well, but it hasn't been enough to undo what has been basically a warmer month overall for a lot of your central states and a lot of your eastern states here. Let's go ahead and dive in and see what the European model has to say for the upcoming pattern. As we just take a look at this, we're going to take this straight towards Friday afternoon, tomorrow from the time we're making this video. And we do see some thunderstorms already popping up, especially for Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma. There is some showery activity as well as snowfall showers for Canada up here in the north. Same story in the northwest, quite active. And it is quite warm as well for a lot of the central and eastern states as your jet stream is kind of ridging over these areas. As we just keep going, I want to take us straight towards Saturday. We do have a slight risk of severe weather. I mentioned this yesterday that I still expected severe weather for Saturday, even though we didn't have a categorical outlook for it yet. And sure enough, we do have a pretty medium chance of seeing some severe weather in here, so it probably will be relatively active for a lot of areas, not only in this kind of warm quadrant where we have a lot of Gulf moisture, but probably in the areas nearby the low or adjacent to it. It's going to be an interesting day. There is some snowfall popping up for the northern plains as well, and even for the northeast here, we see some snowfall. So this is all stuff to pay attention to. Now, things get a whole lot worse once we move towards Sunday on March 30th. This is when a lot of your more major severe weather gets going, where we have a pretty big shot. And I mean big as in space-wise, because we're really seeing, the Deep South, a lot of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, other areas of the Deep South and Southeast all having a chance of severe weather underneath this 997 low pressure system that is between Wisconsin and Illinois. There is a colder pocket now behind that cold front where we are seeing some snowfall for the Rockies, upper Midwest as well. And for the central western states, we're even seeing some storminess here as well. Let's just take this towards Monday on March 31st. And the main area to watch for severe weather on this day is going to be mostly the mid-Atlantic and southeast here, still underneath this pretty major low that's now over Canada. That's also bringing some snowfall to parts of the Great Lakes as well. Definitely something to pay attention to. And we see the west is still active. We do expect that for the majority of the upcoming pattern, as we kind of noted. So keep that in mind. And really, once we reach towards Tuesday, we're going to be starting everything all over again. This is April 1st, and we have another strong low on the eastern side of the Rockies. And this is bringing a lot of snowfall to the mountainous west area. But I do suspect that we could see some pretty massive severe weather from this one as well. So let's take this towards Wednesday, which does not look too shabby whatsoever. 980 there nearby Nebraska, maybe South Dakota, maybe Iowa area. Some snowfall here for the upper Midwest and northern plains. And we certainly have a cold front kind of extended out ahead of this low, as well as a warm front here. So we see the warm, humid air really tracking northward for the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic area here. And we're likely seeing intense thunderstorms in this corridor. So probably back-to-back severe weather events. And it's hard to know the intensity, especially, beyond 5 days. There's a lot that needs to be worked out, but it still does look pretty intense to say the least. Let's take it towards Thursday, and we start to see this traveling eastward. We see some of the Deep South, some of the Ohio Valley getting involved here. I think this could be a multi-day event itself. So Thursday the 3rd, still need to be watching for that severe weather. And even as we move towards Friday the 4th, we see it kind of stagnant, but still the Deep South, even the Mid-Atlantic and parts of the Ohio Valley now, seeing some thunderstorm activity, if not severe weather. And by Saturday, that moves towards the east and eventually moves out right afterwards. So again, maybe back to back to back, because we have a more substantial storm system trying to develop near Texas. We have snowfall for the Four Corner states, really intense snowfall. And we have really intense looking thunderstorms popping up for Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, maybe even Alabama here by Sunday on the 6th. As we take this towards Monday on the 7th, we do get a low trying to form here over East Texas. The way this low is forming and where it's forming would tell me that this is probably a pretty exclusive event for the deeper south areas with more showery conditions to the north. But there is plenty of time for things to change. This is beyond 10 days. So really, really interesting. And by the time this low is located, if it truly is located over northern Alabama, we'd be watching underneath for severe weather chances. Right as we move on, that actually wants to bring a snowstorm perhaps to Virginia, Pennsylvania, the Delmarva. We see another low come by Eastern Carolina. Take this with a grain of salt. This is the European model, not the GFS model. This seems very GFS-like, what it's trying to show, but we're looking at hours 3:30 here, 3:36. This is well into the long range. This is pretty much these areas seeing snowfall. That's a little bit beyond their last frost date, when it typically is. So definitely take this with a grain of salt, but we'll pay attention, of course, if this continues to be a trend, but I'm very doubtful. And then we do end up with a little bit of maybe a quieter pattern by the 11th, but, it's that far out. It's so far out. 360 hours, this could look quite a bit different, but we see back-to-back-to-back major storms on this model, GFS model. We do get that first one, of course, as it's just happening over the next couple of days. We get that second one, and we see snowfall for the Great Lakes up into Pennsylvania, New York, New England. A little bit snowier there. Another system here around the 5th, 6th. bringing some severe weather. And we do get that colder time around the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th on this model as well. It's not quite as cold, and there's certainly no snowfall in Eastern Carolina, so we don't have great agreement, I wouldn't say, from the models on that fact, which shouldn't be surprising whatsoever. Looking at the total precipitation, we are seeing still, I would say, close to average amounts in the West. It has decreased over the last week or two, but definitely still very decent. Nothing to be concerned about as far as like low amounts of precipitation. And the East is just exploding with precipitation, especially the south central area straight into the deep south. And it does extend up into like the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, again, deep south, parts of like the lower Midwest, and then the south central states here, where we are seeing inches and inches and inches of precipitation just over the next few days, or a couple of weeks, I should say. Looking at the anomalies, we see just mostly above average conditions in the east as far as precipitation, and again, very close to normal for a lot of the west. But this area in here is inches above average, and this is only 2 weeks. I mean, most areas only average maybe an inch or two per week this time of year. So to see areas like this where it's looking like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches above average, that is very substantial for only a 2-week period. Now, as we take a look at the total snowfall, the European model, like I mentioned, we see plenty in the west as there's just repetitive storms, some in the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, and then there is some around for the Mid-Atlantic, even parts of debatably the southeast, like South Carolina, North Carolina. And then as far as like real plowable snowfall, you have to go up to like northern New York, northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, or Maine, which I would say is very realistic for this time of year, with the exception of these very far southeastern snowfall areas. The GFS model excludes those. It does expand on the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic a little bit here, but still semi-realistic, definitely with some of those short-term cooldowns that are usually associated with immediate storminess in the area. I could see a couple of more minor snowfall events happening in these areas. Now, as we dive into the Storm Prediction Center outlooks, there's going to be quite a bit of these. We see 2 lighter green areas. We'll start with that. That's your general thunderstorm risk areas where we expect general thunderstorms to be possible. We don't necessarily expect severe weather, but it is definitely possible. These events are very hard to predict, so still heed every watch, warning, and advisory. The 2 darker green areas here are going to be your level 1 marginal risk of severe weather, where we expect isolated severe weather reports to be possible in there. As we move towards day 2, which will be for Friday on the 28th, we see a large general thunderstorm risk area and another day with 2 marginal risk areas. Day 3, which is that Saturday that we were talking about, so Saturday the 29th, we see a very large general thunderstorm risk area, a little one for Florida, and then we have the marginal risk here for a lot of the plains and Midwest, but we do have this level 2 slight risk over Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. That is where we expect a little bit more scattered about severe weather reports to come in, a little bit more of an elevated chance versus a general or a marginal risk. Now, as we move into the extended day range, here is your day 4 extended day. This is for Sunday on the 30th, and we have a very large yellow area, and this does roughly translate to a slight risk. It's a 15% chance risk. They only add the categories for days 1, 2, and 3. Beyond that, we only get these percentages, and it can only be 15 or 30. That's the only 2 that they offer in this extended day. We only have the 15 right now, which again roughly translates to a slight risk, but it is very large. So I would suspect that we would probably see an enhanced risk at least in here, if not maybe even more, God forbid. So we'll be watching this Sunday very closely, and we will reveal this tomorrow. We will know a lot about it tomorrow, so stay tuned for that video. And then the day after, like I mentioned, we're watching the deep south, southeast, and mid-Atlantic for the same thing, a very large slight risk, if not maybe even a little bit more going on in there. And I suspect over the coming day or 2, we will actually have more extended day outlooks being issued. So stay tuned for all of that. We do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.